All right. Well, welcome, everyone. I'm your host, Jonathan Reynolds. I'm on the Titus Talent team. And you are welcome here today. Thanks for signing up to hear about how empowered people drive extraordinary business results. If you want ordinary and then extraordinary, you came to the right place, turning your ordinary into extraordinary. I am very, very excited to welcome Traci Austin, who is a trusted voice, not only in my world and my life, but a trusted voice into our team at Titus and to many of our clients. And so that's why we're putting this on. As Chief Talent Officer, Traci, she owns and runs Elevated Talent Consulting, which is a fantastic national organization that helps people with all things people, helps companies and organizations with their people. And so we've had a really great relationship over the years. Because a lot of things that Traci does, we don't do. And so we get asked by our clients, hey, do you know somebody who can do this? Do you know somebody who does this? Do you know somebody who does? And we go, yes, Elevated Talent Consulting, and Traci Austin is your go-to. And so it's been wonderful. And Traci's done the same for us, sharing some of her wonderful clients with us. And so we trust one another. If we trust Traci, I would love to introduce you to Traci. Here she is. I will mute myself, but let me point out one button on your screen, on your Zoom screen. There's a little button that says Q&A at the bottom. If at any point during this time together, in the next 45 minutes, 50 minutes or so, that Traci is speaking and training and bringing up things and you're like, oh, I have a question. Oh, I have a question. I have a real situation. And if you want to bring up a real life situation in your organization that you'd love to get some counsel on in front of everybody, obviously scrub the names to keep personal things personal. But Traci can answer them live at the end. We'll have some time to tackle some of your real issues. All right, over to you, Traci.
Awesome, Jonathan. Thank you so much for you and your team and putting this together today. So we're talking about empowerment, and I love starting with what the dictionary says. So the dictionary says that empowerment is the authority or power given to someone to do something. And why does empowerment matter? Well, empowerment, isn't permission. It's that clarity, trust, and accountability. And, what is so interesting is we work with organizations on retaining teams. So on training, on putting people strategies together to have the right people in the right role once they're inside the organization. And so much of that comes from how individuals feel in the role. So I want you to reflect just for a second and think about when you feel like you're empowered, meaning you're given the clarity, the trust, the accountability to do something, are you going to step into that in a much bigger way? And now that you've had a second to think about that, typically the answer is yes. And by the way, use the chat because the chat's fun. But really think about what that is, because when we don't have that, when we don't have clarity, when we don't know what winning looks like, what happens is we're not sure how to actually get to the result. And so what we're going to talk about today, if we want to jump to the next slide, is, I really want you to think about how you're going to approach today's webinar, because it can be really helpful to how you then empower your employees and the folks that you work with. And so one of the tools that we use is, we call it insight, action, and result. And it's really this kind of way of coaching. And so think about today, are there any insights that have popped in so far? It might be, hey, empowerment. What is empowerment? So when you think about an insight of what resonates with you, and so often the trainings that I'm in all the time, I will have insight after insight after insight, right? But yet if we don't create any behavioral change or commit to an action on it, we're never going to get to a result. And what we see so often in meetings with our clients and the client meetings that our clients have with their team members is that there's not the commitment to a specific result. And so often we've not aligned on what an actual result is that we're aiming for. And so I just want to start that today and name, like, the result I'm looking for out of our webinar today is that you walk away with one specific insight that leads to an action that allows you to get to your business result. So with that, if we can go to the next slide. Um, the leadership behaviors that unlock performance, those behaviors are when we empower our employees. And yet, what does conditions of empowerment actually look like? It looks like vulnerability and curiosity. And so, when we talk about vulnerability, vulnerability is sometimes a word that sounds really scary. It's like, well, what is that actually? And what it is it's sharing what is important to us. And so, so often when we start conversations, it's either something negative or it's something negative about someone else versus, us owning and saying, hey, this is what was important to me about this. Or vulnerability also looks like, hey, Jonathan, I actually made a mistake and I showed up 3 minutes late today and I apologize for that. And that's an example of when we can name vulnerability, we're owning what we're doing and our hand is in that. And so, really just think about the conversations that you're having with your team. Are you owning your own mistakes? Are you getting curious about, hey, does my team have the information that they need to actually get to the result? And what does that look like? And those are some key leadership behaviors that start to unlock performance. And when we create that environment where folks feel safe to be vulnerable, again, we get to that psychological safety where they do feel safe to be vulnerable. They feel safe to bringing things forward and not sweeping problems under the rugs. And we're going to talk here in a minute about some complaints. Well, guess what? Typically, we get complaints when we do not have psychological safety inside of our organization. So if we want to shift to the next slide. All right. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about a tough talk framework. So when we have a tough talk with an individual, and this typically comes after we figure out what the complaint is, which we're going to do in a minute. But when we move into a conversation, we want to prepare with purpose. What is the reason that we actually want to have the conversation? And guess what? It is not to shame or blame someone else. It is not to make them feel horrible. And, so often, when I'm coaching and talking with other folks, Jonathan, I saw you just smile there. I don't know about you, but like when somebody comes at me and tells me how horrible I am, I don't typically make a behavioral change. So when we're preparing for the conversation, it is what is that behavioral change we want to make? What is it that we want them to see in that? And then we want to have partnership in that conversation. So let me give you an example of what this may look like. So if we are having a conversation with someone about their performance. And it could be that the performance has to do with their attendance. I'm going to do a real kind of low stakes attendance conversation. So the purpose of the conversation is I'm going to start with curiosity around why are they always late to work? What's actually going on? And what is there? So when I'm preparing, I'm going to pull up all the facts. What does the attendance look like? Has there been any requests for time off, et cetera? When I start that conversation, I'm going to start it with, hey, Sarah, I'm so, grateful for the conversation today. I really want to meet to understand, kind of what's going on, but I also have some specific goals. And one of those goals is that we have some agreements on when we are at work and what the outcomes of that time is. And does that feel like a good conversation for today? And with that, I've set the intention and the tone. And then I'm going to bring up the outcomes that have happened, right? So here's the facts that I have. Is there anything that's going on that I don't yet know about? You notice the curiosity there. Now I'm listening into what's not being said. And I'm going to listen to her and what she says. And it could be, there's been items that have happened with childcare and I've lost childcare. My car broke down and I didn't have XYZ. Or there's been an internet issue if we're working remotely where I wasn't able to get on. All of those things. So when I can listen to what's going on, now all of a sudden I can listen to what's unspoken and start to co-create solutions to say, all right, so what would it look like to do an and both? What would it look like for the outcomes of work to be completed and what your needs are from home to also be completed? And then we're going to have a conversation about that. And we're going to lock into what one clear step is for that performance to get a win-win outcome of that. And so that's a framework for how we have one of those tough talks. So now I'd like to go into how do we actually get to the tough talk? What happens before that? And what typically we find is we get a lot of complaints. And the complaints actually tell us what a request is. And so we're going to go through a scenario, and Jonathan and I are going to play this out because it's much more fun to listen to us banter than it is to listen to me just talk. But with that, I want you to think about every complaint is just a poorly worded request. So if every complaint is just a poorly worded request, how do we get from a complaint to a request? So Jonathan, what is your complaint? Oh, I think you're on mute. Hey, Jonathan, I can't hear you. I don't know.
I changed my mic. Okay, there we go.
Amazing.
I don't know what happened. All right. So I feel like I'm walking on eggshells with my manager, and they seem to be disappointed in me, but I just don't know why. And I'm paralyzed all the time, and I don't know what to do. Help me.
Okay. So we have a complaint, which is I feel like my manager's disappointed and I'm walking on eggshells and I don't know why. So the next step here is what are the facts? What are the facts? What is the data of this? And one of the things we want to do here is separate out the facts from the story that we are creating. So the story you just created, Jonathan, was I'm walking on eggshells. Are you literally walking on eggshells? Is that a fact?
No, but when I go into meetings, they always give me this side-eye thing. And when I say something, I can just see them just judging me.
Oh, so what does judgment actually look like?
They don't respond. They don't say anything.
Okay.
They're just silent when I'm in group meetings.
Okay. So have you started to actually look at this when you're in group meetings to have it? And have you had a conversation with them on it yet?
Oh gosh, no, I would never know how to have that conversation.
Okay. Okay. And for our listeners, I'm going to back out for a second. We just went through it and I wanted to go through it first so that you know, okay, what are we looking for when we start to hear complaints to actually have the conversation? So you're terrified to have a conversation because you wouldn't know what to do. And so the facts that I have is you're not getting responses in meetings, correct?
Yeah, and I'm fearful. I don't want to bring it up because I don't know how to bring it up.
Okay. So are we making specific requests to your manager that they're not responding to?
No, I just want lots more positive. I'm making this up, everybody.
I know, this is perfect.
I want more positive affirmation. When I say something, I want them to be like supportive of me, and especially in a group, and say that it's a great comment, but they don't give it any verbal cues or feedback.
Okay. Have you let them know what you need for you to be successful and ask them what they needed?
No.
Okay. So within that, I'm going to back out for 1 second for audience listening in. There's two ways that you can really find out from your team members what they need. And Jonathan and I both, are partners with Predictive Index. So Predictive Index is one of those big ones. And another one that we love is the 5 languages of appreciation and really figuring out how somebody wants to be appreciated. So they're not going to tell you. There's still ways to get that. So as a manager, what I want you to think about is how, knowing that our employees have these types of complaints, how do we address them? And as a leader, it is our job to address these with our team. And as we can see, Jonathan's going, I don't know what to do with it. So Jonathan, do you want to flip into the leader role now and we can address it as, hey, I've got an employee that shuts down and seems like they won't interact with me?
Sure. So I'm just role flipping with you.
No, I want you to be the leader. That your complaint is you've got an employee that.
Oh, I get you. I get you. All right, cool. And I'm making this up right now.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, cool. So Traci, I have this employee, and they just seem super nervousy, not confident, very trepidatious when it comes to contributing in meetings. Every time they say something, they look at me like they're scared that I'm going to hit them.
Okay. So, what conversations have you had with them up to this point about this?
Oh, I haven't had any.
Okay. And are they performing right now?
Yes, but they're not taking risks. So they're just going
Okay.
just up to the line. That's it.
Okay. So, not taking risks yet. Can we go to the next bullet? Um, and so when we think about this, what's the impact that you want to have with having a conversation with them in order to get to a different result? So you want them to take risks. Anything else?
Yeah, I just want them to grow in confidence.
Okay. So you want them to grow in confidence. Do they know that you believe in them right now?
Well, I hired them.
I love that. I know. But just because you hired them, does that mean that they think that you believe in them?
Well, we interviewed 7 different candidates, and I made them the offer. Surely that says a lot, doesn't it?
So sometimes assumptions can get the best of us. And if we go back in, what would it look like for you to actually ask them once we've identified that it sounds like that there's a mismatch in interpretation of behaviors?
Yeah.
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 So can we go to the next one? The next bullet. Right. So now it's the request. So if we want to go back one slide to our conversation, awesome. So now that we know what the problem is, we have an employee that does not have the confidence to take risks that we need them to take in order to grow in that confidence and to be the star player that Jonathan, you hired them to be. Here's what that conversation can look like. So we're going to prepare for the conversation with purpose. Hey, the impact we want to have at the end is that this individual walks out knowing that we are a champion of them. We're giving them permission to take risks within kind of a framework, and we believe in them in order to step into this because we hired them out of 7 people. And even though they may not realize that, we 100% realize that. And so this conversation can look like, hey, Jonathan, thanks so much for the conversation today. I want to chat a little bit about the incredible work that you're doing and some work that is available to get to the outcomes for Titus. Does this sound like a great conversation that we can have today?
Yes.
So now we're going to kind of start to talk. Here's something I've noticed. Can I share an observation with you?
Oh, yeah, it's vulnerable. Sure. Go ahead.
Remember, that was part of our conversation up front is the empowerment comes from vulnerability. And so we're going to start to name those facts of, Jonathan, what I'm noticing is that there's meetings where I'm not really hearing you say anything, yet I know based on the conversations we've had in the past or some of the work that you're presenting, you've got some incredible insights. And I'm curious, what's going on within these conversations? Because I'd love to hear you speak more.
Well, I just get nervous that I'm going to say something stupid and you'll be embarrassed by me in front of everyone else in the room.
Okay. And so I want you to step into what that looks like, for you to name what's there, because I'm not going to be embarrassed by what you say, but I want to support you to get to those results. What would that look like to do that?
Well, just this conversation helps a lot because now I know you want me to speak up and be more confident. So I guess the meeting this afternoon that we have, I'll try it.
Amazing. That's incredible. So I love this solution. So kind of that next step that we're going to take is that you're going to try it this afternoon. And is there anything you need from me in that meeting for you to start to step into this?
Yeah, if you could just give some affirmation, if it's good, just give me something, not in a patronizing way, but just
Yeah.
acknowledge that I said something, and I shut down otherwise. And then maybe afterwards, if you could just send me something, if I could have done it better, or any feedback. I just need lots of feedback.
Okay, so how about we do a quick 5-minute conversation after the meeting? I've got a couple minutes after it that we can kind of circle back around and do a quick debrief of what went really well. And if there's an observation I have, is it okay if I share that at that time, just us one-on-one?
Yeah, sounds great. I love it.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much for that. So that is an example of identifying a complaint and turning it into a request and having a tough talk very specifically around that. So if we want to go to kind of that next slide, is this reflection. And as we do that, one of the things I really want you to think about is your hand. Jonathan's going to laugh at my silly hand popping up here, but like your hand is in every single thing that you do. And I really want you to think about that. Like how you empower people, how you make them feel has to do with what your behavior is as a leader. So as you think about the complaints this week, what are the real requests under it? It could be a complaint like we heard from Jonathan at the beginning that had to do with an employee complaint. Then we flipped it into the manager actually also has a complaint about that employee. And so what is those real requests underneath it? And are you willing to step in to some of that vulnerable space because your hand's in it in order to have that conversation with them to get to the results that you're looking for? And again, empowered people take ownership, and accountable teams really drive those results. And so as the leader, it is definitely up to you to take that ownership. So Jonathan, if this were you and you were truly that manager, what leadership behavior would you shift this week stepping into that based on our scenario?
Well, I'd start practicing this with my teenagers for a start. This is great.
It's amazing what it happens with teenagers with this.
Yeah, these are life people skills. They're not just management and leadership skills in the workplace. So yeah, that's one thing I can do. Just create space, have the conversation is now good. Empower my teenagers to articulate anything else that I'm missing before I go into my solve mode and lecture them on what I think they need a change in. So yeah, I will use this in my personal world for sure.
Amazing. And so we do have a Tough Talk blueprint. So if you loved what you heard today and you kind of want to see that walking through with a couple other examples, you can go ahead and download that there, and that'll be sent right to you.
Great.
Awesome. Thanks for playing, Jonathan.
This is great. Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. Well, some questions coming through. You can hit the Q&A button there. If you have questions, real life, real situations that you're faced in work right now, people, challenges, and you're like, hey, I wouldn't mind hypothetically talk about a colleague or co-worker or a direct report or something that you're faced with or something that you're commonly faced with. Or like me, you can talk about your own kids and ask if Traci's got some input on that. But yeah, so you can put that in the Q&A section right now. We'll get to that. But Traci showed us just how this type of leadership can really unlock ownership, where people can actually own their issues and own the dialogue as well, putting a structure and a framework. I love structures and frameworks to actually have conversations, have tough conversations, or not even great conversations. Give me a framework. I used to think in that way. I'm often in situations where I'm sort of in these networking events and big rooms of people, and I'm like, man, it can be really tiring. But if you put yourself some scaffolding around it, you actually know where to hang out, and just to sit there and rest there and not feel awkward at moments. So especially when it comes to any kind of conflict in a relationship, frameworks are really, really helpful. and structure matters. So thank you so much for talking some of this stuff through, Traci. But all right, carry on. Over to you. Is this you, Traci, still? Thank you.
I can definitely take this one for sure. So, the business goals to inspire. So whenever we're having these key conversations with folks around goals, so if we think back to kind of that 6th step that we had, prepare with intention, we have to ground in on a goal. And so if we're not grounded in on a goal, we're not leading into the same direction. So what does your team need to look like to fulfill your desired outcome, right? When we really think about that, now we can look at the goals that we're creating. When will you need to create and fill new roles in order to reach these goals? And so this is allowing you to start to create the people strategy that allows you to step into the one-on-one conversations then. So Jonathan, I'm going to hand it back to you as you start to kind of continue down with those business goals to inspire.
Yeah, totally. If you know Titus, we're all about like, what are you trying to do with your organization? What are you trying to do, achieve, or accomplish? Why do you exist? What does excellence look like? What are outcomes that you're trying to achieve look like? And the best way of doing that is quantifiably, not just saying, well, you want to be better. Like, okay, I want to lose weight. How much weight do you want to lose? And by when? Like, the actual specificity with the goal really, really helps, because everybody then knows quantifiably we're going for the same thing. And if you ever played a game with somebody and they're like, maybe it's a board game and you got family there, friends around, and people like, someone wants to read the rules and like, okay, let me read the rules here, and what does winning look like, and how do you win the game? And someone's like, oh, forget winning, let's just play and have fun. That drives some personalities like mine absolutely nuts. But many people get frustrated if they don't know what they're doing, why they're doing it, and just the aimless nature of it. So when you actually break it down for your team, saying, okay, what does your team need to look like to fulfill its desired goal? What does winning actually look like? If everyone can agree on what winning looks like, specifically, quantifiably, etc., and it's very, very clear that you can write it down in one sentence, and then you can measure yourself towards those goals, it really, really helps. And then the thing that Traci's talked about, there happens to be a why behind it now. So it's not like, why are you always picking on me? Why are you always why are you always bringing up issues? I'm like, well, because we're on the same team and we're trying to win together. So it really, really helps. So when will you need to create and fill new roles to reach these goals? Like, often people can feel, I feel overworked. I feel this. Can we just hire more people around here? And you're like, well, one of the frameworks that we have here, one of the goals that we have is, maybe you're a for-profit organization, is profitability. And if we keep adding more people to do this work, yes, it will be easier to get it done because many hands, but one of our major goals is we're for profit, and it actually dilutes that. So we can't do that. Or maybe you're a not-for-profit here and you work on a very, very tight budget, and people say, I wish we had more help around here. You think, okay, one of our goals is this. We have to stay within our budget. We can't go beyond it. It's not like we can just reach into money that's not there. So shared goals and shared frameworks and shared structure and shared vision on what the outcomes are supposed to be, it makes all of those tough conversations a little bit easier because everyone knows the context. And so how will your annual growth create these great opportunities? Just framing always like that. I think that really, really helps. And I'll give you an example because I like parenting ones. I have 3 teenagers at home. I realized, I was like, why am I not getting through to one of my kids around being responsible for what they've been entrusted? I'll made up example, their room. It's not that made up. It's a real example. Okay, their room. Keep your room tidy. I'm thinking, why do I even care? It's annoying to keep bringing it up. Do I care? And I'm like, yeah, I do care, because it's not about the room being tidy here. It's about the future discipline and training of responsibility, because they're going to be a responsible adult one day, and they will be entrusted with more if they can manage what they've been given. And so I just said it like that. I'm like, hey, you're going to be moving out of the house at some point, and you're going to have to learn to do a lot more and bigger, more responsible things than keep your room. I don't enjoy nagging you or reminding you that you need to be excellent in this area, but I'm trying to prepare you for the next thing. If you can remember that, maybe it'll motivate you to be good at this so that you're ready for some of the other things. They're like, oh, I just thought you really, really were nitpicky about me, having a room tidy. And I'm thinking, just close the door and you don't have to go in there. But it wasn't about that. So context matters. The story, the bigger story matters. And if you frame these conversations with the bigger story, it really, really helps. So roles are really, really important, because who are you to say I can and can't do this? Who are you to talk to me about my attitude in the meeting? Well, I'm on the same team as you are. We all represent one another, etc. So what outcomes am I responsible for, and what outcomes are you responsible for? And how will our success be measured together, because we're on the same team? And so you have a right to go to your teammate and call them out on stuff, because that level of accountability is one of the highest forms of respect, by saying, I care about you so much, I respect you so much, I actually want to lift you up to a higher level. And so I'm going to not call you out in front of people to humiliate you. I'm just going to call you up so that you actually step into who you're supposed to be on this team and living in the fullness of why you're here. And I want to see you grow and develop in those things. So it's just calling people up to those things. But part of our roles are great teammates. You might think, well, I got this teammate next to me, he's not pulling their weight. Like, well, show them respect and hold them accountable for the role they're in. That is not something you have to be somebody's manager for. So, but part of the role clarity is, I'm on the same team as you, and I want us to win together. And I want you to win. I want to win. Let's go. So that sense of confidence and ownership is really, really important. As it goes into when you're dealing with roles in your company, like literally positions in your company, I think it's so much easier, not just to hire people, but so much easier to hire people, onboard people, manage people, hold people accountable, if there's clarity around what you're hiring them to do. So one of the things we say at Titus is 100% of the compensation, people like to talk about, how much are you going to pay me for that? What's my salary? What is the bonus? Are there any additions? Are there any other benefits? We want to talk all about that stuff. I'm like, yes, 100% of that should equal 100% of the outcome or performance that we hired you to get done. We can negotiate around the compensation, but we're also going to negotiate around performance and value creation. What you bring to this organization to make us hit our goals faster and you basically increase the value of the organization. And by doing so, you increase your value if you're playing a key part. So there are skills-based descriptions, like must have an MBA, must have an accounting degree, must have this, must have 7 years of experience. I'm like, so what? What's that got to do with the outcome? What are you wanting them to, how do you want your organization to look different by hiring them? And what's that time frame it looks different? So really important, take those skills and go, skills aside, what am I wanting the end result after a certain period of time? I like to do 1 year. So if we hired this person today, fast forward a year, what would make us say that was an amazing hire, and not because they're a wonderful addition to our culture? That's beautiful. I love that. But that's probably not what you're going to pay them all that money for. You're probably paying them to get a job done. So let's focus on that first. The wonderful addition to your culture and a new teammate who encourages people, who notices people, who plays well with others, all of those kind of things, but ultimately gets the job that you hire them to do done. So you start with 365 days in and then back your way. Okay, what needs to be done by day 90? So we shouldn't be waiting sort of juries out. Have you ever heard that? People are like, hey, how's so-and-so in their role? I'm like, jury's out. Like, what do you mean? We're still trying to figure out if we like them or not. Like, what do you mean? What do you mean? Like, day 90, what should they have done? Very clear. They need to know what's expected of them by day 90. Really important. Like, because clarity, as Brene Brown says, to be clear is kind. Is kind when we're clear. Like, so there's no ambiguity. That's the funny little role play. I'm like, oh, my manager's giving me a side eye and I don't know if they're happy with me or they're not giving me feedback. If it's clear what you're supposed to be doing, kindness is right there embedded, and we can actually celebrate around those activities and goals and what they should be doing, achieving, and accomplishing. So very, very clear, break it that way. As again, anyone who knows Titus, we talk about, hey, it's about the whole person. When you hire the whole person, you manage the whole person, you develop the whole person. It's not just about this resume. It's not just, we say the briefcase. People show up with their briefcase and slap it down on the desk, pop open the lid, and they're like, here, let me tell you about all of my accolades and my awards and trophies that I've got through my life. And we're like, great. What does that mean for us in our organization? So it's tying that kind of who they are, their hopes and dreams and career goals and aspirations, bring it all in together. That's the briefcase part. And we say that's roughly a third of the equation. The other third would be heart, their values, their character, their motivation, kind of that real, like, core sense of their identity and who they have made to be and who they're becoming. That piece, the heart. And then the head is their behaviors and cognitive, which are very intrinsic, very hardwired. This is how people react and respond under pressure. And so their behaviors, which are just so hardwired in them. And you know, if somebody sort of shouted there was a disaster in a movie theater, people are all going to behave in different ways. Some people are going to look at the exit straight away. Some people are going to look at those who need help getting out of the exit. Some people are going, all right, are we going to, how do I serve other people? Should we administrate this? How do we do this most efficiently? And some people are just out there running. And that's why chaos happens, because we're all different and different hardwiring. So we look at the behaviors and cognitive reasoning of, they understand the consequences of their actions as well. They can see multiple steps ahead. So questions. If there's anything I've said here or anything Traci said, and you're like, I wouldn't mind asking that. Or if you just think, sheesh, I've heard that Traci has this eight-week program of development of leaders in these areas so they can actually become a lot stronger. Actually, can you just talk about your 8-week program, Traci? Oh, you're on mute. Sorry. There you go.
Absolutely. So we have a leadership development program that is an 8-week program to really support leaders just coming into leadership. And what we find is that curiosity and the vulnerability and how to actually enroll folks in having them do what you need them to do is not a skill most of them have ever learned before. So this 8-week program really goes through the distinction between management and leadership. It goes through, how do we create a coaching culture? How do we create presence with that individual? What does accountability actually look like? And how do we hold someone accountable? And a little bit on critical thinking and change management. So this program, we focus on the training of that program, but then we also have a coaching call every week. So there's a training call and a coaching call. Why? Well, so many of us have not experienced accountability or different ways to hold folks accountable. So when we have these coaching calls, it is, did you do what you said you were going to do? Because that builds trust with your team when you do what you say you're going to do. So here we get to practice that for 8 weeks so that they can follow through on those promises and actually have some of the conversations that, you know, were shared earlier today with their team members to get the results that Jonathan had talked about.
I love it. I love it. Somebody was asking me recently, like, you have a training program on this, and I'm like, yeah, it's a whole year. We do 4 parts, and and they're like, could you not just condense it into one? I'm like, yeah, it'd be like me going to a trainer and saying, hey, I know I need help, physical fitness trainer. I need help here. Can you just do one session with me and then I'll be done? And they'd be like, no, we can't just do one session. It doesn't work like that. It's something that we're going to be building and working on your goals together. And it takes time to work those muscles. And I was like, oh yeah, man, I'm in the microwave culture. I'm like, just let's go, just fix it for me. Can you just inject me with this coaching so I don't have to deal with it? You know. All right. So questions, if you'd like to, you can use the obviously you can scan this code here if you want to schedule some time further and deeper dive into these things or hear more about Traci's elevated consulting talent consulting course, 8-week course. You can certainly do that, or if you have questions right now. So I'm going to go to a question that just popped in right now, which is, all right, Traci, this one's for you. Ready?
Okay.
What are the leading indicators that an employee is not feeling empowered? It goes a little bit more. If they haven't mentioned anything, should the manager look out for anything performance related, or should the manager just continuously ask if the employee has everything they need?
Yeah, this is such a great question. This is such a great question. And, you know, what we see when an employee doesn't feel empowered is a lot of times they will become small. They won't ask questions. They won't bring forward suggestions. You know, another thing that we typically see is they're kind of sitting there doing this, like, you know, like, they're not jumping on to the next thing. So a lot of times it's they don't feel like they have the permission to do it. So, it could be that if you're a virtual organization, you're not seeing them move forward in the next steps of a project, or they're not coming to you a conversation if you have employees physically. And we serve mostly organizations that are in the construction trades or manufacturing. So a lot of times, like, we see them physically standing around, right? Like, they're out in a concrete bed and they're not moving on to the next step. They're standing there and we're saying, hey, what do you think the next thing you need to do is? Well, I don't know. I just don't want to get in trouble. Okay. So those are some of those indicators is, we're not asking questions. We're not moving forward on the next thing. We're standing around and not doing what is needed to move the organization and our work forward.
Wow, that's good. Good answer. I have a question for you. When you're dealing with like onboarding and accountability, what do some of those milestones look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we're looking at onboarding, one of the things that we do before we ever bring a new hire in, and all of our recruitment goes to you. So you're recruiting the team members that come in for our clients. But one of the things we do with our clients is we sit down and we say, what does winning look like at 1 week? What does winning look like at 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? So we're getting clarity around what winning looks like in the behaviors and in the work outcomes. And so what we then do is we create essentially a roadmap for that employee as to what that winning looks like. But we take it one step further and we're training mentors. So individuals that are in the same role, but have been there a little bit longer. And we give them different questions to ask that new hire so that they have a peer that they can start becoming friends with, but they also have a peer that is there to support them to get some of those questions answered. And that mentor has a very specific checklist of what they need to know and by when.
And do you find that people actually follow this stuff?
Yes.
These onboarding?
Yep, for sure.
How do they write it down? Are they checking in with somebody? Are they keeping a record of it?
Yeah, so we started with, both of them get what the onboarding plan is. What's beautiful about it is that it gives the new hire the roadmap so that, if they're proactive, they're going to be asking those questions, but it also gives the mentor the roadmap so that if the new hire doesn't come ask the questions, they're asking the specific questions of that new hire to ensure that they're moving it forward. And this mentor program serves two purposes. It serves solving the turnover problem in the first 90 days, but it also serves now that mentor is being coached on, are they potentially leadership material in the future, and giving them that support for in-role growth.
Interesting. Cool. Another one, in your experience, what's the biggest hurdle for leadership teams when trying to implement your tough talk framework with their teams?
Yeah. So one of the biggest hurdles within that is slowing down enough to get curious and then actually finding the facts, right? So it's, we hear complaints, and a lot of times, especially, I think we've all had certain employees that we just start writing them off because they complain. And so really getting curious about what are those complaints. And so how we've overcome a lot of that is we'll actually bring that to the team to say, hey, what are the biggest requests we need to solve this week? Now we start it with complaints and then we turn it into requests. Because what it does is it then has that team start to problem solve together so that we can handle those things. But one of those biggest hurdles is getting started with it because it doesn't feel natural and you have to be vulnerable in the conversations.
This topic of vulnerability is there is another whole hour or 20 hours for leadership around vulnerability. It is one of the things that I've seen as a trait that really causes that galvanizing unity among leadership teams when there's a willingness to be vulnerable. And so, because that takes the trust to a whole new level. So thanks for bringing that word in there too. Great stuff. Well, I love all of this stuff. We look at the onboarding thing very similarly to Traci, as we're not only for our own teams internally, for all of our employees around the country, and we're 100% mobile or remote. But in the last 5 years, we've recruited and placed just over 7,000 people and placed them at organizations across North America in remote and in-person roles. And we encourage a format of onboarding very similar to this, but also just having a long-term journey. Say, what does the whole first year look like? And so, because I read a stat recently, it says that in the first 72 hours of employment, people will be able to articulate, if you ask them, how long do you think you'll stay at this organization? And they'll give you a response based on the first 72 hours of onboarding. Things like, it was awkward because they weren't prepared for me. No one had my desk ready, my cubicle, my computer, like I didn't have email set up. They didn't seem ready or prepared for me. And so it gave a feeling or a sense of, is this a short stop for me on my career journey? Or is this a longer stop? Am I gripped by the mission? Or as I've been chatting with people in my first 72 hours, the people I've met, I'm not sure if they're my people. And so people are making a determination. Now, is it true or not? But there's a sense in them, is this the place that I'm going to be? And they've already decided they're going to be there at least, so they just got hired. So, it's amazing. You have to have intentionality in the onboarding. It doesn't just happen by chance. In the same way, culture doesn't just, intentional culture and great cultures don't happen by chance. They are very, very intentional. So, any success stories that you have, Traci, of some of your clients in these areas of onboarding that come to mind where you've taken them through a journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have one, and this is they're a concrete manufacturer. So what they were struggling with is they were doing warm body hiring. I think we've all heard of that term. Like, we're just going to hire anybody that shows up and put them in a role versus ensuring we have a fit to role, right? And so what we really did with them is we started to get intentional about, what are you hiring for? So much of what you just talked about, Jonathan, like your questions about goals, a lot of times when I first start working with clients, they haven't asked those questions yet. So we started asking some of those similar questions. What were the goals? What is the fit to role within this? And then the culture was the next key thing that we looked at. And what we found within this organization is that there was almost looking down upon certain positions. And so we shifted the culture into, and truly believing that every role here has a significant purpose to play, as it does, because guess what? We cannot do our work without folks pouring concrete into our forms. We cannot do our work without the folks that are out putting these walls up on construction sites, et cetera. So when we started to change our mindset around it and our belief around it, it changed how folks felt. And we started inviting in the conversations around, how does work feel? What does this look like? And now we started to get the enrollment. Once we had the enrollment in, we took several folks through our leadership development program and through the mentor program that I just talked about. End result is Mid-States, when they went back and looked at what they had spent in the previous 6 months versus the first 6 months of working with us, saved $500,000 in their recruitment and retention costs just from the turnover of team members in that first 90 days.
Wow. That's on the convex of that, probably our biggest challenges that leaders, executive teams face when hiring is a lack of clarity on the role. So they things like, okay, I need this role filled. I'll know when I know. I'll know when I know who it is when you bring me more people. And I can't describe it, but when I meet them, I will know. And I'm like, this is a terrible way to recruit. Because what happens is, and what I find is what they're really saying, they'll describe this thing. It's a person, but it feels like a thing because they're just like, what? You want them to have this experience, this experience, this experience, and this experience, and this experience. And then also on top of that, you want them to kind of have a sort of feeling, a sense that you have here, 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 here. And then they start interviewing people. And yeah, less of that, more of that. Not that, some of this. Okay, da, da, da. And it just keeps changing and keeps changing and changing. But if they'd, at the very, very beginning, I just think, golly, I hope you never build a house, you know, or, you know, because nobody's going to start building a house if you just say, well, why don't you just start building? And I'll tell you what I want as we start going. You know, you can't do that. Foundations are really, really important because they determine how high and how wide the house can be. You've got to set those things at the beginning before you start rushing into that whole sort of frame. You know, so that's one of the biggest things. So clear goals and outcomes and expectations really, really helps. And sometimes what you're looking for doesn't actually exist. You know, if I say, oh, I want to go and stay in New York this weekend for my wife's birthday, and I would like to stay in a 5-star hotel, and I would like to be an on-site amazing spa and a phenomenal restaurants, and my budget is $99 a night. Like, and I put a search in the thing, and it comes back at nothing. And what is it asking me to do? It's saying you got to change some of your criteria. You know, you either change up the dollar amount or you reduce the stars. So that's what it is. You know, I could do a 1-star with a spa. And it's a jetted tub that you wouldn't want to go in for $99. Okay, but you understand that you change the criteria. But if you start with not just the criteria, but you start with outcomes. What do you want this experience to be? And so it's really, really important that outcomes determine those metrics that you want. Where are you trying to go? What is the vision? Who are you becoming? Start with that, then create the roles, then create your metrics, because that will just, it shapes everything. And it will save you a lot of headache when it goes to interviewing, hiring, and wasting a lot of time and money. You know, I'll know when I know. And so I'm giving you the opposite of what Traci's talking about here as well. So it's so important. All of this comes down to you've got to care. You've got to care for your people. And even before they've arrived, like, we are a culture that cares about our people. And we're going to show you that with the kindness and the clarity of the role. Here's what the outcomes are. We really want somebody to come in here who can crush it, but they want somebody who comes in here and knows what the expectations are, that they're not shocked and surprised, like, you want me to do what? You know, that's not possible. That creates a horrible anxiety for people. So care for your people. They'll care for your business. Or another way I like to say it, a little bit more antagonistic, care for your people or somebody else will. And so, and that's, we're in the business of that. We're working with organizations who have demonstrated care for their people and finding people who want to step into that kind of culture. But part of the care is clear expectations. It is a horrible feeling when you don't know what's expected of you, but you feel like you're disappointing people. So let's do the opposite of that. Show people that they're valued, they're important, and you care for them by clear expectations. Can you imagine if it wasn't clear how much they were getting paid, or it wasn't clear how much you were going to get paid? It's what people felt like it was worth that week. Like, some anxiety that comes with that. So just remove all of that ambiguity, be really clear on outcomes, really clear on expectations, really clear on the communication. Hey, we're going to have these regular touch points of feedback. And so, yes, it is easier said than done. But I tell you, if you take some of the things that Traci shared today and put framework around it and let everyone know what the framework is, then they're not caught off guard. That horrible feeling is like, hey, can we chat after this meeting? It's like, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. But like if you say, hey, after every meeting, when you present, we'll just touch base for 2 minutes. I'll give you some feedback and you give me some feedback and we'll talk about how I can support you next. Oh my gosh, now no one's caught off guard, is nervous about this surprise meeting. To be clear is kind. Thank you, Brene Brown, for that. So empowerment plus structure equals extraordinary or extraordinary results. Thank you, Traci. If you'd like to reach out to Traci or like to reach out to anyone on our team, please do so here. You can hit that QR code. And if not, have a wonderful rest of your week. being clear and kind and having a tough conversation with something that maybe that's sitting out there. You're like, oh, geez, I know I need to do this. Use the framework and it'll be fantastic. And of course, if you or others on your team could benefit from an 8-week leadership development program with Traci's team, you can also reach out to her. They have one starting on September 23rd. So, all right. Thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your day and weekend.
Thank you.
It's not weekend. It feels like it should be weekend. It's only
It
Tuesday.
does.
Goodness me.
It does.
Have a great weekend, everyone. Thanks all. Bye-bye.